Hello and welcome to Historia Romana. Episode 13. The Etruscans and the Greeks. While the Romans and the Latins more broadly have been the main focus of the series thus far, it would be a mistake to assume their story has been taking place in a vacuum. No culture is entirely self-contained, and even the later Roman writers were forced to admit that they had inherited much of their culture from outside civilizations. Today we'll briefly cover the two most important of these foreign cultures, the Etruscans to their north and the Greeks to their south. The Etruscans, or the Villanovans as they are known in their earliest phase, being named after an ancient cemetery near the modern city of Bologna, first appear in the archaeological record around 900 BC. Centered north of the Tiber River in what is now Tuscany, the Villanovans quickly demonstrated themselves to have been much more advanced than any of the other Italic tribes. Not only were they the first people in Italy to urbanize, housing many thousands of people in their cities, but they were also the first to practice ironworking, a metal which was both more sturdy and much more common than the ever-elusive tin required to make bronze. Furthermore, the Villanovans established trade routes which went much further than any previous Italian civilization, reaching as far away as North Africa, Illyria, and even the Baltic coast, as evidenced by Villanovan pottery and Baltic amber, which was used to make jewelry. While the Villanovans primarily practiced cremation like the other Italic tribes, several instances of inhumation have been found, especially after 800 BC. Those who were buried instead of cremated seem to have been of higher social standing, being laid to rest in elaborate chamber tombs and surrounded by valuable items, such as the aforementioned iron tools and jewelry. Most notable of all, however, was that the Villanovans spoke a peculiar language which would eventually evolve into Etruscan, which was not of Italic origin, nor even of Indo-European origin for that matter. This led to some confusion about the ethnic origins of this civilization, with many 20th century linguists proposing the idea that they were a non-Italic people who originally came from Anatolia, modern Turkey. This was because they were described by ancient Greek writers, notably Herodotus, as descendants of the Pelasgians, who originated in western Anatolia. The migration out of the Aegean region to Italy was said to have been led by a man named Tyrrhenus, hence why the Greeks would thereafter refer to these people as the Tyrrhenians, as well as why the west coast of Italy is called the Tyrrhenian Sea. Furthermore, brief inscriptions which display a language very similar to Etruscan have been found on the Aegean island of Lemnos, further pointing to a migration between Anatolia and Italy. However, more recent linguistic and genetic investigations have conflicted with this theory, and most modern scholars believe that the Etruscans were indeed an Italic people who, for unknown reasons, chose to keep speaking an older Paleo-European language. The reason we know anything at all about the Etruscan language is that around 700 BC, they began using their own alphabet to write things down, which is generally considered to mark the end of the earlier Villanovan period and the proper beginning of Etruscan civilization. It is this Etruscan alphabet that would be adapted by the Latins to their south a century later, even if their spoken languages were otherwise unintelligible with each other. The Etruscans, however, had not created this alphabet themselves, but had instead adapted it from another civilization, the Greeks. While ancient writers like Dionysius and Cato the Elder would say otherwise, there is no evidence of Greeks migrating to live in Italy during the 2nd millennium BC. Later Grecophile writers who lived under the Roman Empire liked to propagate the Greek origin myth for Rome, and were always looking for evidence to push this narrative. When the Greeks encountered Italic tribes with similar cultural practices as them, such as the Oenotrians, they falsely assumed this meant they must have descended from older Proto-Greeks who had colonized Italy. These supposed Proto-Greeks, or the Mycenaeans as they are usually called, were instead solely confined to the Aegean, living within the borders of modern Greece and the western coast of Anatolia, even if a few of their traders sold goods in southern Italy. Around 1150 BC, just a few decades after the Trojan War, the Mycenaean civilization went into a sharp decline, eventually falling into a full Dark Age, where the major cities were abandoned and writing was forgotten. It was only during the 9th century BC that Greek civilization, as we know it today, began to emerge. With the reoccupation of the old Mycenaean cities, however, these early Greeks now faced the issue of overpopulation, as the limited amount of farmland in mountainous Greece meant that there wasn't enough food available to feed everyone. Furthermore, their old trade networks had disappeared, making trading for food with peoples outside of the Aegean much more difficult. Aiming to kill two birds with one stone, many of the new Greek cities aimed to solve the issue through colonization. Groups of families would be shipped across the sea to found brand new cities, serving either to create agricultural colonies to feed the metropole or trading posts to buy food and other foreign goods. These efforts were originally focused in the Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean regions, but eventually they began to look west towards Italy. The first known Greek colony in Italy was on the small island of Ischia, near the Bay of Naples, around 785 BC. Founded in a joint effort by the Greek cities of Chalcis and Eretria, it was intended as a trade hub to buy and sell goods with the Villanovans further north, but the settlement grew much quicker than expected, and another colony was founded nearby on the mainland in 777, named Cumae, to house the extra families. In 743, another group from Chalcis settled at the very toe of Italy, founding Rhegion. 3 years later, settlers from Cumae founded Messina on the northeastern tip of Sicily, directly across the strait from Rhegion. In 734, a group from the city of Corinth settled further south on Sicily, creating the colony of Syracuse. In total, at least 40 new Greek city-states, collectively known by the Latins as Magna Graecia, Greater Greece, would be founded in southern Italy and Sicily by the 6th century BC. While each of these colonies was politically independent, most attained close cultural and economic connections with their home cities back in Greece. Therefore, while there was naturally some conflict between the Greek settlers and the native Italians, the Italic tribes began to consider these Italian Greeks, or Italiots, to be their most important trading partners. This new trading network between the Italians and the Greeks would usher in a brand new era in Italian anthropology, known as the Orientalizing period. Not only were far more foreign goods being imported to the peninsula, but it was also altering the existing cultures with new ideas. We've already covered the Etruscans and the Latins adapting the Greek alphabet for their own languages, but this also applied to their religions. Coming from a common Indo-European background, it is not surprising that the three cultures would have already shared some similarities in their pantheon of gods and their mythical stories. However, the arrival of the Greeks definitely caused some lasting changes to their mythologies, such as the Latins adopting Greek figures like Hercules and Aeneas as their ancestors. I will cover early Roman religion in detail in a future appendix, but for now, just know that it pulled a lot of inspiration from the Greek and Etruscan pantheons. Speaking of the Etruscans, they had been busy expanding their own influence across the peninsula. Cato the Elder would later write that, at their height, the Etruscans dominated all of the other Italic tribes. While this statement is an exaggeration, it certainly captured the rapid growth of their power. Dozens of new Etruscan settlements were founded in what is now the Po Valley in the north of Italy, on the island of Corsica to their west, and even a few down in Campania and southern Latium. The center of Etruscan power, however, remained in the Villanovan heartland of Tuscany, or Etruria, as it came to be known by the Romans. By 600 BC, 12 major city-states had emerged to dominate the others. The two most southern cities, Caer and Veii, have already been mentioned in the previous episodes, but other prominent cities included Vulci, Tarquinii, and Clusium, all of whom will eventually interact with Rome in future episodes. These 12 cities formed a cultural and economic alliance known today as the Etruscan League, in order to better normalize relations with each other and consolidate their control over the trade with the Greeks. This was, however, neither a military alliance or a unified state, and the Etruscan cities would continue to wage war against each other as much as their neighbors. Squeezed in between the Etruscans in the north and the Greeks in the south were, of course, the Latins, but also the numerous other Italic tribes of central and southern Italy. Tribal classification and affiliation is hard to determine at this early stage of Roman history, as most of the ones we know of today did not exist until at least the 6th century BC. Broadly speaking, they were split into two main groups. The first were the Umbrian speakers, who lived west of the Etruscans and Latins, and of whom the Sabines were a member. These people lived quite similarly to the early Latins we discussed last episode, living in small agricultural communities. Further south were the Oscan speakers, who were forced to live as semi-nomadic pastoralists due to the limited amount of available farmland. The Greeks taking over the fertile coastal regions certainly didn't help their relative poverty. Beyond these Italic tribes, there were also the Iapygians, a Illyrian tribe who had crossed the Adriatic Sea into Apulia, the heel of Italy, sometime during the 10th century BC. There were the Ligurians and the Venetics, living respectively near modern Genoa and Venice in northern Italy, who spoke what linguists call either Para-Italic or Para-Celtic. There were the Nuragics of Sardinia and Corsica, who spoke a Paleo-European language. Finally, there were the Siculians of Sicily, who spoke another Para-Italic language and went on to create their own Greek-style writing script. The main point is that between all of these distinct peoples, Italy in the early 1st millennium BC was a very diverse landscape, and one of the great lasting consequences of the rise of Rome, for better or worse, was that we know almost nothing about it. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time.